In 1996, two convicted felons staged a daring escape, setting off on a chaotic journey across the United States. The situation took a chilling turn when a foreign military officer vanished without a trace, sparking fears that the fugitives had escalated their crimes to murder, with urgency mounting. The FBI launched a relentless pursuit, determined to capture the escapees before more lives were lost. In Alabama, on May 21, 1996, 3 prisoners were being transported to a courthouse by a county deputy. Among them was Michael Thompson, a man awaiting trial for murder. The deputy was familiar with Thompson from previous transports and had no reason to suspect anything unusual that day. In a seemingly routine request, Thompson convinced the deputy to let him sit in the front seat. Also in the vehicle was Roger Yadden, a career criminal with a history of 17 burglaries, and notably, a track record of successfully breaking out of jail 3 times before. The third prisoner, meant for a work detail, was not considered a threat. Since the courthouse was only a short drive away, none of the inmates were placed in handcuffs. As they neared the outskirts of Talladega, Alabama, Thompson made his move. With lightning speed, he lunged at the deputy, catching him off guard. "Stay calm," Thompson ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "Keep driving." Within moments, he had seized the officer's firearm, holding it against him while issuing firm commands. When they reached a desolate stretch of road, the fugitives forced the deputy and the other prisoner out of the vehicle. "Out! Now!" Thompson ordered, his grip on the gun unshaken. Stripping the deputy and the prisoner of their clothes, they left them humiliated and vulnerable. In the chaos, a spare handcuff key slipped unnoticed to the ground. "Sit down. Now!" Thompson's tone made it clear. Resistance would not end well, despite the terror gripping him. The deputy took note of every detail, knowing he would have only one chance to act. As the escapees fled toward Talladega, abandoning their prison uniforms, the deputy spotted the fallen key. Acting quickly, he freed himself and the remaining prisoner before running toward the nearest road to seek help. Meanwhile, Thompson and Yadden had become armed and extremely dangerous. Now in possession of the deputy's service pistol and a shotgun from the police vehicle, they posed a deadly threat to anyone who crossed their path. To make matters worse, Thompson, still dressed in a police uniform, could easily deceive unsuspecting civilians. Acting fast, the deputy and the freed prisoner flagged down a car and rushed to the nearest police station. "They took my gun," the deputy reported breathlessly. "One of them is dressed like a cop." Within moments, an emergency bulletin was issued, alerting law enforcement across the region to be on the lookout for the fugitives and the stolen police vehicle. Despite launching an intensive statewide manhunt, authorities faced a daunting challenge. The rugged backroads of Alabama stretched for hundreds of miles, providing endless opportunities for the escapees to vanish. As night fell, the tension escalated. Where were Thompson and Yadden, and who would be their next victim? Despite an extensive police search, Michael Thompson and Roger Yadden remained elusive. They had vanished into Alabama's vast rural landscape, their stolen police vehicle blending into the surroundings. As law enforcement intensified their search, a critical breakthrough came later that night. An emergency responder reported a bizarre encounter with a man impersonating a police officer. The paramedic, Bob Gordon, was driving near Talladega when he noticed flashing police lights in his rear-view mirror. Assuming it was a routine traffic stop, he pulled over. A man in a sheriff's uniform approached and demanded to see his license and wallet. Something about the situation felt off. "We pulled you over because your vehicle matches a description of one involved in a hit-and-run," the officer stated flatly. Gordon was certain he had been in no accident. "That can't be right," he said. "You can check my truck. There's not a single scratch on it." The officer insisted that the description matched and said they needed to verify the details. Gordon, though confused, didn't argue. Everything about the man's uniform, badge, and demeanor seemed legitimate. Until something changed. A second man, dressed in civilian clothes and carrying a shotgun, suddenly emerged from the shadows and rushed toward Gordon's truck. "Stay in the car," the officer commanded, gripping his holster. Fear gripped Gordon as the realization hit. This wasn't law enforcement. It was an ambush. Roger Yadden and Michael Thompson had mastered the art of deception. Posing as an officer, Thompson had gained Gordon's trust, only for Yadden to close in and take control. "We're taking your truck," Yadden barked, "and your cash." "I have a family, please," Gordon pleaded. His words fell on deaf ears. The criminals had one goal: escape, and Gordon was just another obstacle in their path. After stealing his wallet, truck, and weapon, the fugitives forced him into the trunk of the stolen police car and slammed it shut. Gordon's heart pounded. If they intended to leave him alive, why lock him up like this? Moments later, he heard the roar of his own truck's engine as the fugitives sped away, abandoning the police car with him still trapped inside. It was sweltering inside. As minutes stretched into hours, Gordon knew he had to stay calm. Panicking would only drain his energy. If he overheated, he would pass out, and that would be the end. Drawing on his years of experience as a paramedic, he reminded himself, breathe, conserve energy, think. Then, through the darkness, his fingers brushed against something, a tire iron. Fueled by survival instinct, Gordon pried open the trunk latch from the inside, finally forcing the lid open. Drenched in sweat but alive, he stumbled toward the nearest house. A woman answered his desperate knocks and called the police. Authorities immediately updated the manhunt. Thompson and Yadden were now in a stolen black pickup truck and heavily armed. The chase had taken a new turn. The fugitives weren't just running anymore. They were willing to kidnap, rob, and kill to stay free. With a full tank of gas and a 1,900-kilometer head start, they had disappeared once again. But law enforcement wasn't about to let them go. With their newly stolen black pickup truck and an arsenal of weapons, Michael Thompson and Roger Yadden were now among the most wanted men in the country. Despite the FBI's efforts, they had vanished without a trace. For 7 days, law enforcement scoured Alabama and the surrounding states. Officers checked highways, truck stops, and back roads, but the fugitives were always one step ahead. Then, nearly 2,000 kilometers away, an unexpected clue surfaced. A black pickup truck, stripped of its license plates, was discovered abandoned in a remote area near Santa Rosa, New Mexico. When local police ran a VIN check, their suspicions were confirmed. It was the same vehicle stolen from paramedic Bob Gordon in Alabama. This revelation escalated the case to federal jurisdiction. With the fugitives having crossed state lines, the FBI officially took over the investigation. While searching the abandoned pickup, officers found something chilling: a handwritten note stuffed into the glove compartment. It was a prison form from Alabama, with several names and addresses scribbled on the back. Among them was the name of a woman in Terre Haute, Indiana, a relative of Roger Yadden. Had the fugitives gone to Indiana? The FBI quickly interviewed Yadden's aunt, but she claimed to know nothing. However, she mentioned that Yadden had old friends in the area, though she couldn't recall their names. As agents dug deeper, another unsettling discovery surfaced. At the bottom of a nearby lake in Indiana, divers found a submerged car, a red rental vehicle that had been reported missing in Colorado. The FBI retrieved the vehicle and began examining its contents. Inside, they found heavy checkmark of British passport, belonging to Major David Nichols, a high-ranking officer in the British military. Heavy checkmark travel receipts, confirming he'd been on a cross-country trip in the U.S. Heavy checkmark a piece of paper with the same Alabama prison address found in the pickup truck. At this point, the FBI made a shocking connection. The fugitives weren't just carjackers and kidnappers. They were now tied to an international missing persons case. Through British military channels, the FBI learned that Major Nichols had landed in Denver, Colorado, on May 20th, 1996. He was set to attend a NATO language training program in New Mexico, followed by a second course in Texas. Before his scheduled arrival, Nichols told his wife and children that he wanted to explore the U.S. for a few days before reporting for duty. But he never arrived at his destination. His last known activity? Buying gas in a small town near the Colorado-New Mexico border, just 240 kilometers from where Thompson and Yadden had abandoned the black pickup. The British government, now deeply concerned, pressed the FBI for answers. Had Nichols crossed paths with the fugitives? Was he still alive? Or had Thompson and Yadden claimed yet another victim? With Major David Nichols missing and his rental car found submerged in an Indiana lake, the FBI now faced an urgent question. Where was his body? Every clue pointed to Michael Thompson and Roger Yadden. Their crime spree had already spanned multiple states, and investigators feared Nichols had become another casualty in their ruthless attempt to stay free. The FBI analyzed Nichols' last movements, tracing his credit card transactions. His final purchase was at a gas station in Raton, New Mexico, near the Colorado border. That station was just 240 kilometers from the location where the fugitives abandoned their stolen black pickup. Investigators believe Nichols had unknowingly driven straight into the path of two desperate men with nothing to lose. As agents scoured New Mexico, a scrapyard owner in Indiana contacted police. Two men had been seen lurking around his property, one of them closely matching Roger Yadden's description. FBI agents posing as customers visited the yard, striking up a conversation with the owner. "Ever seen these guys?" One agent casually asked, showing photos of Thompson and Yadden. The owner hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, they showed up in early June. One of them, Yadden, I think, was real interested in some old cars." He then recalled something chilling. A few weeks prior, a red car, matching Nichols' rental, had been on his property. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it was at the bottom of a lake. The FBI tightened their net. Convinced the fugitives were hiding nearby, agents expanded their search. Soon, they spotted two men working near a rundown trailer deep in the woods behind the scrapyard. Their hearts pounded. The descriptions matched Thompson and Yadden. However, before they could move in, the men vanished into the trees. The FBI raced to secure the area, setting up surveillance and roadblocks. A short time later, agents chased down a truck, leaving the scrapyard. In the passenger seat, Roger Yadden, his driver, an acquaintance, claimed he had no idea Yadden was a fugitive. Realizing he was caught, Yadden surrendered without a fight. But Michael Thompson, the convicted murderer, was still out there. Would he go down quietly, or would he make one final violent stand? With Roger Yadden finally in custody, the FBI turned its full attention to Michael Thompson, the more dangerous of the two fugitives. They believed he was still hiding somewhere near the scrapyard in Indiana, but with miles of dense woods surrounding the area, track him down would not be easy. Agents worked quickly, searching the trailer and nearby vehicles. Inside an abandoned car, they found a suitcase with a British passport. It belonged to Major David Nichols. His clothes, personal belongings, and travel documents were still inside, further solidifying connection between the missing officer and the fugitives. Investigators were now convinced Thompson and Yadden had abducted Major Nichols. The only question left was, where was his body? As night fell, FBI agents and local law enforcement surrounded the scrapyard, hoping Thompson was still nearby. They decided to search an old trailer deeper in the woods, where he had likely been hiding out. "Michael Thompson, this is the FBI. Come out with your hands up." Silence. When he refused to surrender, agents fired tear gas into the trailer. Nothing. Carefully, the SWAT team stormed inside, weapons drawn. But Thompson was gone. Frustrated but not defeated, the FBI widened their search. The next morning, investigators got the break they needed. A call from an informant. A friend of Yadden's had just spotted Thompson asleep in the back seat of a car near the scrapyard. Agents moved fast. They surrounded the vehicle, prepared for a possible shootout. "Michael Thompson, put your hands where we can see them." This time, there was no resistance. Thompson was exhausted, unarmed, and out of options. He raised his hands and surrendered. After 45 days on the run, covering over 9,000 kilometers, and costing law enforcement thousands of hours in manpower, both fugitives were finally in custody. But there was one last mystery to solve: the whereabouts of Major Nichols' body. And the only person who could reveal the answer was Roger Yadden. With Michael Thompson and Roger Yadden finally behind bars, the FBI's investigation shifted to the biggest unanswered question: what happened to Major David Nichols? Though Thompson refused to speak, Yadden saw an opportunity. Hoping for a reduced sentence, he offered to cooperate. During an FBI interrogation, Yadin detailed how they crossed paths with Major Nichols in New Mexico. "We needed a new car," he admitted. Thompson and Yadin had targeted a remote rest stop, believing that a lone traveler would be an easy victim. That's when Nichols arrived. "He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time," Yadin said. Using the same fake police tactic that had worked before, Thompson approached Nichols, pretending to be law enforcement. Before the major could react, he was forced into the trunk of his own rental car. Yadin claimed that Nichols remained calm and cooperative, just as his wife had predicted. "He told us about his family, his 3 sons," Yadin recalled. "He said he'd do whatever we wanted. He just wanted to go home." But Thompson had no intention of letting him live. As night fell, they drove to a remote area nearly 80 kilometers away, where Thompson ordered Nichols out trunk. Then, without warning, Thompson shot him in the back of the head. Nichols collapsed instantly, but Thompson fired again just to be sure. Afterwards, they left his body in the desert, covering it only slightly with dirt and brush. They took his car, drove it across multiple states, and eventually sank it in an Indiana lake before going into hiding. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, Yadin agreed to lead investigators to Nichols' remains. On September 24, 1996, escorted by an FBI SWAT team, Yadin was taken back to New Mexico's remote desert. For hours, agents feared they might have been led on a wild goose chase. But then, "It's here," Yadin finally said, pointing to a barren patch of earth. Digging through the dry, rocky soil, investigators uncovered what was left of Major David Nichols. Due to months of exposure, forensic specialists had to confirm his identity through dental records, but there was no doubt Nichols had finally been found. His family in England was notified, and arrangements were made to return his remains for a proper burial. Michael Thompson pleaded guilty to murder and carjacking, receiving life without parole. He was also sentenced to 5 additional life terms in Alabama for armed robbery and escape. Roger Yadin avoided the death penalty but was sentenced to 18 years for kidnapping and vehicle theft. But his story didn't end there. Before being transferred to a federal prison, Yadin managed to escape once again, this time from a New Mexico jail. A manhunt was immediately launched, and within 5 weeks, he was found hiding in Alabama, not far from where his crime spree had begun. His escape voided his previous plea deal, and he was retried for his full list of crimes. This time, the jury deliberated for less than an hour. Yadin was convicted on multiple counts of kidnapping, armed robbery, and escape, receiving 5 life sentences, this time without the possibility of parole. Now, both men would spend the rest of their lives behind bars. For the FBI, local law enforcement, and the Nichols family, the case was finally closed. A dedicated British military officer had lost his life, but at least his killers had been caught and held accountable. And though justice had been served, one haunting truth remained. If not for the tireless efforts of law enforcement, Thompson and Yadin would have continued their reign of terror, leaving even more victims in their wake. This time, justice had won,